I'm Tony Val, and this is Hoosier Hometown Heroes. In episode 14, I had a chance to visit with Howe. Harry will be launching the IndyGrit community later this month here in Indianapolis. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Before we go to that, I must thank our sponsor, Promethius Consulting. If your organization is unhappy with your current computer support, if your computers are slowing down, if your staff aren't getting the care and attention they deserve, call Promethius today, 317-733-2388. Promethius is Indy's trusted managed services provider. Now, please enjoy my conversation with Howe. Harry, welcome to the show. It's so nice to have you.
Well, Tony, it's a pleasure to be here. So kind of you to invite me.
Well, the pleasure's all mine. This is one of those interesting instances where not too many days ago, I was thumbing through LinkedIn, and I happened to see a post of yours about you starting this IndyGrit community. And my first thought was, boy, do I want to know more about this. And then I thought, maybe I can have Harry on the show. And I reached out, and just a few days, that was just the other day, and here we are.
It's kind of providential that you had a time slot, and I was available, so here we are.
It all came together lickety-split, and so that's great for me, because now I don't have to wait so long to hear about your concept.
Right.
But I thought maybe a place to start, Harry, is just give us a baseline definition of what you mean by grit.
Sure. So grit, the way I define it, and as it's becoming defined in the literature, has to do with the convergence of passion and perseverance. And those two things coming together for meaningful long-term goals and results. And that is kind of a definition, but I think to really convey the idea, if you're okay with it, I'd like to just share a little story with you, and I brought a prop I'd like
absolutely.
to use. All right.
Let's see what you got.
So here's my prop, and I will kind of unveil it. What I will tell you is that in the bag is a product that you probably have in your home.
Okay.
But you don't know the backstory. So let me share the backstory that I think is a great illustration of grit. So the backstory begins in 1953 with an engineer by the name of Norm Larson. Norm and several of his buddies formed the Rocket Chemical Company. They were aerospace engineers, and to kind of help you understand the background, aerospace was really the darling industry back in those days, in the same way technology is. We, the United States, were involved with the space race. You may have heard that term the Soviet
it's a time
Union.
Or two.
And it was in that era that President Kennedy announced that we as a nation were going to safely send a man to the moon and bring him back. So, that was kind of the context of Norm Larson and his team wanting to develop a solvent that could be used in the aerospace industry. Rust and friction and things like that were kind of a bottleneck for them at that time, and they were looking for a breakthrough. So they formed, in 1953, the Rocket Chemical Company. They worked diligently, came up with what they referred to as water displacement formula number 1. And they put it to the test, but it didn't meet spec. And it was a disappointment, but they went back to the lab and they persevered, they were passionate, they developed water displacement formula 2 and tested it. It too just didn't meet spec, and we kind of continue, and maybe by now you're kind of connecting the dots, but the product I'm talking about is WD-40.
WD-40.
And
Here,
so
hold it up right there. WD-40. We got it.
And so
we all know that.
Probably you've got this in your garage.
Or WD water displacement.
Yes, and so WD-40 was the 40th iteration.
I wondered about that. my goodness.
of this formula. And of course, it did provide that breakthrough in the aerospace industry, just a small thing that we don't even hear or think about. But through their perseverance, their passion that the United States get out ahead in the aerospace industry, win the space race, put a man on the moon, all of that, these guys persevered. And of course, today there are over 2,000 official uses of WD-40 and some unofficial uses. If you look on, if you did a search, you would find that on one occasion, police used WD-40 to extract a thief who tried to escape in an air conditioning duct.
Oh my goodness! Wow, what do they think of next? That's funny. Well, that's a fascinating backstory, and certainly, well, I learned something today. Water displacement, and it was their 40th try. I will never look at a can of WD-40 in quite the same way. I wonder, Harry, so why should I care about grit? I understand that the group is an entrepreneurial group.
Yes.
So why would we care about grit?
Well, so you've probably heard the statistics that 9 out of 10 companies fail, and some people say in their first year. Actually, that's an urban myth. The real statistics from the Small Business Administration would say that in the first 24 months, about 30% of companies will fail.
In the first 24 months,
In the first
my
24
goodness.
months. In the first 2 years, in the first 5 years, about 50%. And 10 years, 66%. 15 years, 75%. Tony, I took the liberty of doing a little homework, and Promethius, the record show was founded in 1999. So congratulations. I mean, you guys are 19 years and going. You've beat the odds, but I'm going to guess you have some stories that you could tell
You better believe it.
Required grit. And so that's why I think that it's important, because there aren't a lot of people talking about the importance of grit in sustaining a business. All too frequently, it's just a lot of cheerleading and so on. And I don't think that it's especially useful. Well, I mean, of course, network connections and so on are useful, but people aren't really telling the honest, unvarnished truth about their business. Just naturally, we're not inclined to share how we struggled.
Keeping up appearances.
Yes.
We're trying to keep up appearances. And if I understand what you're saying, maybe a part of what you're saying is that we are not. There's this idea out there that ownership is where you want to be, and entrepreneurs have this, lifestyles of the rich and famous persona, and the reality is it couldn't be any further from the truth.
Yes,
right?
And it's clear that the deck is stacked against you.
Interesting.
And so I don't think there are plenty of voices out there, and everybody needs some encouragement. There are plenty of those voices, but I kind of feel as though the voice of one in the wilderness, so to speak, saying, hey, this is hard, and you need to make sure that you're passionate about what you're doing, as well as be prepared to be for that persistence, be resilient. And so this community is being built around that idea.
It sounds here like there's a part of your concept is let's be honest with new entrepreneurs and kind of, I don't want to say tough love, but tell it like it is.
Yes, I think that is a good way of thinking about it. And you and I have been involved in networking organizations for many years. In fact, that's where we met, if you recall.
Sure.
And I'm all for that. But one of the things that I'm sure we both experienced is that most of the organizations and networking events we've been involved in, there's a pattern where you go to the event, you shake hands. I say, Tony, how's business at Promethius? Great, we're growing, and you tell me all the great stuff that's going on, and you say, Harry, tell me about how leadership. And So got some new clients, and things are going, really fine. And then maybe there's a third person there, a new business owner, and now he feels like he's got to one-up us and tell how great he is. But then when he goes out to the car at the end of the evening, he thinks to himself, man, am I the only one struggling?
Yes.
I mean, everybody I talk to, they're doing great. I must be the only one here who is struggling.
So I think that's a good segue to start to get specific about IndyGrit community. First of all, the website is literally indygrit.community.
That is correct.
And let's not forget to mention your launch event is September 27th at the Speakeasy downtown.
Yes.
9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m.?
Yes.
And did I tell you that I registered?
You did.
Okay.
And so I'm looking forward to seeing you.
Well, the reason I asked is I couldn't remember. Did I register? I know I meant to register. So I figured you're sitting right here in front of me.
Absolutely.
Did I tell you to register? Well, let's get specific. What's the concept for the IndyGrit community?
Well, I've kind of described the traditional networking event, which I'm not bashing that. I'm just saying there's a place for what we're going to do, which I sometimes refer to as the unnetworking event. And by that, I mean, I just described kind of what I refer to as the successories culture. And I don't know if you're with me, but successories are those, I'm imagining if I walk through Promethius and the halls, there's somewhere in there is a photograph of a mountain climber who's just reached the peak of the mountain, and then there's an inspirational phrase underneath.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
So that is the successories culture. And so at IndyGrit community, if we were to have a similar poster, it would be that same mountain climber who's just kind of fallen off a little precipice, and he's down there dusting himself off and kind of looking up at the mountain and saying, well, that didn't work. Let me try approaching from this little different angle. And so it's honest conversations. It's where people are rewarded and encouraged to be candid and not be afraid of telling about some of the struggles so that we can encourage one another.
And so encouragement will come from the group, will advice, that sort of thing. Is that part of the idea?
Absolutely. And so we want this to be very practical. And so on the 27th, we're going to have a speaker, and we're also going to interweave with the presentation some very practical tips for being grittier. And so a lot of times the focus is on talent. And to some degree, I know that you are talented in many areas, but I'm going to guess you're not an opera singer or something like that.
Oh, that's funny. I actually did study opera.
Really?
No joke. I'm not kidding.
Right.
I can rip off an Italian. Now, I'm not saying I'm professional quality. Trained by professionals. So you picked a weird one.
Well,
that'll be in the Hoosier Hometown Heroes trivia game someday.
But my point is there are some areas, I'll use it on myself. I'm just never going to be an opera singer.
Yeah.
But we can all get grittier. So there is a limit to our natural talents, and some areas we're just not going to improve. But grit is one of the best predictors of success, and it's something that we can all improve on. And so we will be doing some practical exercises during the event to improve our grittiness.
Very good. And is the concept that the group this will be an ongoing affair? Group members will
It is.
reconvene?
So at this kickoff event, we'll be sharing more things, but it's our intention to provide a variety of resources for people who are interested, and we see this as a way of giving back to the community. I'm saying we, and so I'm kind of leading the charge. There is another organization, Apprentice, with Chris Hoyt,
Yes.
who is a part of that, and DK New Media. Doug Carr is also a sponsor. So we have come together, all of us interested in building the entrepreneurial community. We all have a vested interest in that and are passionate about it. And in our minds, this is something that is lacking and needed and can be of great benefit.
It's funny. So Chris the Brain Hoyt was my guest on episode 8 of Hoosier Hometown Heroes. That was a lot of fun for me. I got to know Chris, and I can picture Chris being, let's put it this way, being okay with not sugarcoating the reality. I can see Chris the Brain being very comfortable. I was telling you before we started taping this show, I've never met Doug Carr. I very much would like to, but I've listened to his podcast. I've consumed a lot of his content, and I can see him kind of being the same way. I'm not at all surprised that you guys have seen a need in the market for a little bit of tough love, a little bit of honesty, but being honest with each other. It sounds like your group is going to be a bunch of people who are in the similar boat, which is the buck stops with me, and that can be a lonely place to be. So isn't it nice that you can be honest together, share resources with each other, share ideas with each other, cry on each other's shoulders?
Yes, I mean, in my mind, this is what community is all about. And if we go back to the previous scenario of the more traditional networking organization, it tends to build competition. So when you tell me how great things are going for you, I feel like, well, this is certainly not the time and place to tell Tony that I'm struggling over here. And so there is this one-upmanship that breeds competition. And I mean, it's good for sharing business cards and contacts and broadening your network, but not so much community, in the same way that if we were telling one another about the things we were struggling with and what we're passionate about, those are the things that really bond people together in a community. And so we are very optimistic that this will be it's not for everybody, but those that choose to be a part, it will be a pretty tight-knit group, I predict.
Very good. My guest is Harry Howe. The group is IndyGrit Community. The website is indygrit.community. Their launch event is on September 27th at the Speakeasy downtown, 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. Harry, tell us about the speaker at that event.
Yes. Well, Kristen Van Bussum is an amazing woman, and she is the executive director of Project Alianza, and it is to help children in the coffee lands, specifically Nicaragua, break the cycle of poverty by providing an education for them. And she's got an amazing story that she will share. She's a great speaker, an amazing woman. She was on the TEDx Indianapolis platform, and this is her life work that she's passionate about. But quite frankly, the story that she's going to share about grit is not about her personally, but about a child that really kind of was a pivotal moment in her life that inspired her to do what she's now devoted her life to doing.
Wow. Well, let's not ruin the surprise, but that's very compelling. I can't wait to hear that story and see her speak. So I have registered. How can everyone else register? Through the website?
Sure. Yes. So you can just, the easiest thing to do should be easy to remember, IndyGrit.community. Go to the website, and there are links to register. And I do want to encourage people not to procrastinate. We're at the Speakeasy downtown in the classroom. We've got seating capacity. We're kind of opening it up, but we can really only take about 50 people. And we got about 40 people registered.
Wow!
So don't say, "Well, I will do that the day before," because we'll
do not
probably
delay.
not have seats at that point.
Got it. I was going to be, knowing that I was going to be meeting you today, I just found myself thinking, what are some stories of grit that I can retrieve. Not so much in myself. And by the way, thank you for the kind words about Promethius. I'm going to force my wife to see this episode so she can see how fabulous we are. But I got to thinking, I heard a story just the other day, and in preparing to meet with you, it dawned on me, this is grit. This is all about grit here. I heard George Raveling, the famous basketball coach, recently talking about the 1992 Olympic team. He was an assistant coach on that team, so the Dream Team. And he told a story about one of the trainers for the team, after practice, happened to stay back at the practice facility for most of the day. I can't remember why this gentleman needed or wanted to do that. But when he saw George Raveling, I guess the next morning, he said, "You're not going to believe this, but Larry Bird, after practice, after everyone else was done and was off doing their own thing and seeing the sights and so forth," he said Larry Bird shot baskets for hours and hours and hours. He said, "I couldn't believe it." And he said, if Larry Bird needs to work this hard, he said, what does a guy like me have to do? And that really stuck with me. Of course, by the Dream Team, his NBA career was over. Had nothing to prove. Everyone knew the Dream Team was going to coast to victory. And Larry could have coasted right along with everyone, but he worked harder than everyone.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting story that I hadn't heard before, but it also speaks to another point that I believe is relevant to our discussion, and that is the research that is going on today is showing more and more, as we consider which is more important, nurture or nature, that the research is showing really it has to do about nurture. And there's very little that is in your DNA, so to speak, and a lot more of it has to do with grit and this idea of practice and over a long period of time and getting good. And more the research is just validating that, saying, I can't do this, or I don't have that talent, or is just a fallacy. That if you're passionate about it and you're willing to commit to practicing and honing your craft, developing your skill, that you can probably get there. You may not be the world's best, but you can really take it to that top level. And yeah.
Well, that's fascinating. That means there's hope for me. I might be good at this someday. I just got to keep doing it. That's great. Is that Alexa?
Yeah.
Did we just have Alexa
Well, I don't.
photobomb the show? Isn't that funny?
Well, this shouldn't be on.
That's all right. Technology, I tell you. There's like 9 wireless devices in this room. Harry, I'm so glad that we had the chance to talk about the IndyGrit community, and I got to scratch that itch. I wanted to know what your plan was. I must agree with you now that I've learned some about it. It's much needed, and it's funny. I was talking with someone just the other day, about what do you tell young people that want to own a business? And I said, well, one of the things I tell them that I probably wouldn't have told them years ago is how difficult it is and how, how just it's not for the faint of heart. You have to have grit.
Right. But here is the flip side of that. There are just so many people like you and I. You are very generous, Tony, and bringing people on this show and being very kind and open to providing resources like this that can help people. This is a very generous and giving community, but you've got to ask. And so if you're struggling, then I think there are 2 really great character traits that entrepreneurs need. One is curiosity and the other is humility. So you've got to have the humility to acknowledge that things aren't perfect and you could learn, and then the curiosity to ask somebody like yourself and say, Tony, tell me about, this is what I'm struggling with. Am I the only one? Tell me about a time, and what did you do? And I know that you would be happy to share that, but you've got to have the humility and the curiosity to ask. So don't go it alone.
Yes, absolutely. And it's funny, I do find the further along in my career that I get, when another entrepreneur shares some sort of challenge with me, it's quite often I say, oh, yeah, been there. Yep. Oh, yeah, no, here's what we did. So, and thank you for the kind words, by the way, just about this show in general. But it is, I think one of the things that getting on the other side of the trials and tribulations, not only do we grow as people and we get better at what we do, and so we don't have to face those problems again, but then we can help other people too. Yeah.
And that's what I love about the Indianapolis community, as well as the source of my desire to give back. I mean, people have helped me very generously along the way. I really,
if I had to sum up your career, your recent career, to me, it's about giving back. I think in some ways, you remind me of Monty Rifford. Do you know Monty?
I don't.
Monty's a great guy. You ought to meet Monty. Great guy. But he's a lot like you. He's had a ton of experience. And he wants to give back. He wants to help other people. And there are people like you in the community, and I'm certainly happy to have them on the show. Monty's been on the show. And, it's funny. Indy really is a great place to be an entrepreneur.
It is.
Yeah. I think we have this chip on our shoulders sometimes about Indianapolis, kind of not being hip or cutting edge or whatever, but if you look even just a little, there's a lot of stuff going on.
There is, and if you think about it, how much things have changed positively even in the last 10 years. 10 years ago, we were moaning the fact that there were no direct flights to the West Coast, and now we've got those. I mean, things are happening here.
Things are happening. A lot of people with grit,
yes,
putting their nose to the grindstone.
Well, that is exactly
helping
right.
Making that happen.
That is.
Yeah. Well, Harry, good luck. Let me just mention one last time. The website is indygrit.community. The event is September 27th at the Speakeasy downtown. I'll be there. Harry will be there. 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m.
I'll just add one thing. If you're wavering, we've got snacks catered by my
pretty little pretzels.
Yes,
I did my homework, Harry, and I can't wait to try one of those. So yes, very good. Well, thanks for being on the show.
My
Harry.
pleasure. Thanks so much for inviting me, Tony. It's an honor.
Thank you.